Information presented on Sky News Real Estate is general in nature. Viewers should seek their own professional advice before purchasing products or services. Sky News Real Estate may receive a fee for commercial arrangements with companies featured in this programming. Sky News Real Estate. Smart investing.
Hello and welcome to Smart Investing. I got that wrong to start with, gents. I'm CharlesTarbey, filling in for Chris Gray. And on tonight's show, how hard is it for people with pets to find a rental property? And does that lead to opportunities for investors? What are some of the most popular suburbs for renters? That's going to be interesting too. Derek's going to run us through that. I'll introduce Derek and Tom shortly. And the latest realestate.com.au property outlook report that showed that demand is dropping in Sydney. So what does this mean for buyers and sellers? So joining us tonight is Derek Taylor, realestate.co. Is it .com?
.com.au.
It's not .co anymore, is it? I was going to go .co.nz, but I didn't know I'd do that. .com.au, sales manager, a great guy too, sales manager for News Corp Real Estate, and expert Tom Panos from realestate.com. Everybody knows Tom. All around the world, I think you've become a major speaker right around the country. So it's interesting to get your view tonight, Tom, and also Derek, on what's happening around the market. But what we're going to find out first is it's time to take a look, take the pulse and look at the property market from across Australia, from what you've got, Derek. You can give us a little bit of information on that.
Yeah, look, and thank you for having me on the program, Charles, and evening, Tom. Look, without doubt, the market's definitely more subdued, and I think there's price decline nationally, and buyer demand's more moderated. I think it does vary from market to market. If you have a look at the more high-performing markets, you've got Hobart doing really well, the ACT.
Yeah, Hobart's one I want to touch on, because I keep the stats every week, and I'm finding some changes starting to occur in Hobart. So we'll be interested to see what you've got there. Yeah,
look, and in terms of buyer demand and price growth, whether it be over the last 12 months, we've seen significant growth in both those areas, and even the last quarter. So Hobart's, the last 2 years had very high demand. The key issue down there is now supply in terms of rental property, because rentals had 2 years of very peak demand. They just didn't have the supply there, so that's an area we have to watch.
A lot of investors migrated to there because they gained equity in Melbourne markets or Sydney markets, Tom,
and affordability,
and that halo effect continued out through that whole area there. So we were talking about the fact that there might be too many investors out of Hobart. So,
well, they've done a lot of work, the government down there, in terms of the economy. It's going along quite well and attracting more and more tourism, not just domestic tourism, but international, and Hobart's. I think the outlook for Hobart is very strong.
In what way? From what perspective?
Yeah, very strong buyer demand at the moment. Hobart, interestingly enough, 5 of our top 10 most in-demand suburbs nationally actually appear down in Hobart. And I'll have a look at some of the data in terms of Hobart while I'm here. And nationally, we've got Bellerive in Tasmania, South Hobart, Battery Point, Hobart itself, which we spoke about, and West Hobart. So generally, that's a really good indication in terms of buyer demand on realestate.com.au.
And from the chart that you're reading from there, which has got the best or the most viable that you can see?
Yeah, you'd be looking at Bellerive in Tasmania. So Hobart itself's doing really well, but Bellerive is the number 2 most in-demand suburb nationally across our site.
Tom, what are you finding with your agency you're dealing with?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one, because when you look at Tasmania, you've got Hobart, and there's no question about it. Demand is absolute crazy. Agents are saying that they list properties and they sell them within days. And then you have a look at another part of Tassie, which Tasmanians call as Lonnie. I can't even say it. Lonson.
I've had trouble earlier as well.
Yes.
So I told them to get us a whiskey each, but they declined.
Yes. Drink and present. I think it's great. It's better than drink driving, isn't it? But Lonnie, Launceston is, I think, a little bit of a different story there. So I just think that there's a lot going there. And as you touched on, Charles, I think the fact that people in Sydney and Melbourne that had their properties go up incredibly in value, they turned around and they thought to themselves, hang on a second, this area here, they've got, you know, fantastic lifestyle. Yep. And there is a group of people in Australia that love that kind of weather. They love a weather that's, you know, not too hot. And
traditionally, as you know, the Melbournians, and many of them gravitated towards the Sunshine Coast. So we saw a big uplift in the Sunshine Coast market because of that. They can fly in, very easy flight from Melbourne into the airport there in Maroochydore. I think it's Maroochydore. A little bit. Oh,
Maroochydore is the airport there.
And you're flying in and you see some magnificent properties, so you know that the people from Melbourne have gone there. But then there's that residual buyer who've tried to get into investment, and in some cases they couldn't because of the prices in Sydney or Melbourne, so they gravitated towards Hobart. And there's a significant number of developments still going in that district. And I don't know whether they've missed the opportunity because that wave or that halo effect is starting to slow down. So there might be some developers sitting right on the edge of it, and it may not fare too well for them, but it may fare very well for buyers and investors, first-home buyers and investors. So, now, Form 1. There's some changes
one
there.
form.
I'm sorry. Here we go again.
One form. This is a really cool initiative.
This is a tough gig.
Bob, I'm confused. This is a rental thing, is it?
One Form's Australia's #1 rental application. So any tenants that are looking at renting a property will complete a One Form profile, and they can then submit that to the property manager in terms of applying for
You've added some new features.
A particular property, yes. Yeah. So we've added a new pets profile section. So not only can potential renters now complete the profile for themselves and then submit that application to the property manager.
Pets as well.
We can do it for the pets, which is really important, and you know, just providing that more in-depth information so property managers and landlords can make more informed decisions in terms of that particular renter. The other end of the equation is in terms of the renter experience, is that if a particular property you're applying for isn't quite suited because of the pet you have, you might need a bigger backyard because you've got a larger dog, the property manager can then work with you on something that might be coming available down the track. And interestingly enough, when we launched it in the first 12 hours, we had something like 4,000 profiles, pet profiles created, and it's very similar to a Facebook profile is probably the good example. You can put a picture of your pet, your most loved one, as well as a whole heap of information.
So I can get this right, Derek. This is, you don't have to actually be in the market to rent out a property. This is a bit like LinkedIn.
Oh no, you've got to, it is very much for your rental applications. So
right. So you only fill out one of these when you're actually applying for a rental property.
Yeah. So my advice would be, if you know you're about to start your rental journey, I would complete your One Form application as early as possible, because basically the One Form application collects all the information that a property manager will need in terms of the approval process. Right. If you've got a pet, it's really important you complete that in detail with a photo of your pet and as much information as you can, so that way then when it does go to the property manager, they can just make a more informed decision. And I'd also suggest that if you've got a pet and that you need specific requirements, have a bit of a chat to the property manager as well, because they'd be more than happy to work with you, whether it's that property or another one that might be coming on the market soon.
I know how hard it is for people with pets. Being a real estate practitioner, you know that it's not always the favoured thing.
Yes.
So why did you take this angle? What was your...
Yeah, it came from market feedback. So we're always looking at making the property journey simple, efficient and stress-free for our customers, whether that be the people looking to buy and sell property, or for renters. And renters play an important part of the equation. And it's incredibly competitive out there, as you know, in terms of renting. You know, high demand. You know, sometimes renters are having to pay weeks in advance or even higher prices to secure their property.
A lot of government intervention with regards to that too, but I think it's changing in favour of the tenants. There's a changing real estate market out there. Tom and I were talking about earlier about real estate agents and their businesses and how difficult it's become. And I think that the real estate industry is going through major change along with the marketplace that we're going through, Derek. So your view on that, Tom?
Yeah, I think, Charles, for the first time I'm talking to real estate principals and real estate agents, and they're saying to me, Tom, this winter I'm not going to Europe. This winter I'm battling down the hatches and I'm actually going to stay working. I ask them why, and they just say the profits haven't been there that they've been there in previous years, that they're actually finding that there's been less transactions. They're finding that normally when the market's hot, you've got no stock and you're making, sales because of the demand, but many of them are saying that they're shorter buyers and they're shorter sellers, and it's been a difficult period for a lot of these real estate offices. And I think that we're beginning to see maybe some real estate agents potentially looking at, what they'll do in the future.
Okay. We're going to go into the stats in a minute, but I just think that, people ask you for indicators. They say, how's the market or what's going on? We at the coalface, we say things like, if you want to look at it in an agent's window, and you see the same property in there week after week, that's an indication. Or you see properties that are real estate agents' windows and there's 10 photographs and 9 of them got sold on. That's an indication. If you're watching the way agents change the way they advertise or the way they market themselves on social media, they're not as gung-ho as they were.
Correct.
Maybe 3 or 4 or 5. That's an indication. It's a really strange way of looking at how the market is.
Yeah, I mean, the spring in the step of some of the agents has gone down a little bit. The other thing, I mean, I can tell you, Charles, I auction properties in a lot of areas that are very, very resilient, Newtown, but I can't remember, Derek and Charles, when was the last time that there was a property in Newtown that was on the market for 3-4 months?
Yes.
And that exists now.
I can't remember that either.
That exists. There are properties that have got signboards that just sit there because there hasn't been a buyer that's able to engage. Now, if it's happening in robust areas that have always been known to actually be recession-proof, like Newtown, I'm beginning to think to myself that we've got to carefully look at the pockets all over Australia and what's going to happen over the next 6 months.
We always say a for sale sign is a sign of an agent's success, and 4 weeks later, if there's no sold sticker on it, it's a sign of their failure to achieve a result.
Correct.
A lot of agents that don't move their signs around suffer that. Derek, before I go into my charts, what are the most popular areas for renters right now?
For renters right now, well, I had a bit of a look before I came on the show, and in terms of suburbs, it's had the biggest growth over the last 12 months. In New South Wales, it's Narembeen, which is just on the north side of Sydney up near Artarmon, and they've had about 37% year-on-year growth in terms of rental demand. Wow. We've got Canterbury in Victoria, Wilston in Queensland, which has had quite significant growth of around 60% year-on-year demand. And we've got Ferryden Park in South Australia and Kensington in WA, all around 80% year-on-year growth. So very high rental demand, which is good for investors as well.
Okay. Well, let's cover off on the charts this week. I just wanted to go through the auction clearance rates. We're going to touch on that a little bit more in the next segment, but 63.5% was the clearance rate this week across the country. Of course, that will drop as the evening progresses and the days progress into this week. That's normally what happens, but 73% was this time last year. So there is a very big difference when you look at it. The best capital cities were not Sydney and Melbourne. Now, Sydney came in at 66.9% with 774 auctions. Melbourne came in at 63.5% with 1,137 auctions. Now, Melbourne last year was also closer to the 73%, but the best performing capital city was Canberra at 74.2%. So something's going on in Canberra, but the one that I like the most this week is Adelaide. For the last 3 to 4 weeks now, it's been in the 60s. And this time last year, it was in the 60s, early 60s. So that's probably the most consistent one of all when I look around the traps. But I'll ask you your view on the Sydney market in a second. The next chart that we like to look at is the listings, listing numbers. Now, they declined only slightly. There was a 0.16% decline. But again, the interesting thing about that stat is that this time last year, when we look back, we still have 8.56% more stock on the market this time than we did this time last year. Now, again, with the least number of buyers that we've seen around the traps, that's really a bit of a concern for sellers. The rental market as well. There is a bit of a decline in Hobart in terms of the last 3 weeks, but it's still a very strong market. But the last 3 weeks have seen a decline, and it's a plus 0.69% in terms of all capital cities. But Sydney was reasonably consistent, but Perth was the most consistent that I could see in the marketplace. And finally, I look at the vacancy rates. This is the one that really helps me understand what's going on out there. Perth sadly came in at 9.18%. That's the highest it's been for a little while. It's been in the 6s, 7s. The best performing capital city is Melbourne at 0.74%. That's really outstanding. Sydney 2.49%. Overall 4.13%. We'll be back after the break to ask the team of experts a little bit more about what's going on in the marketplace.
You're watching Sky News Real Estate. Smart investing. Welcome back to Sky News Real Estate. Smart investing.
Well, we're going to take a closer look at the marketplace when it comes to the auctions in Sydney. So I'm going to get Tom's view on that. And I think it's an important thing because Tom is one of the most prolific auctioneers in the marketplace, and Sydney has been driving the real estate market for really quite some time. And also going to get back to Derek on some questions. But right now, Tom, what's your view on the way in which it's going in the marketplace in Sydney?
I think any property at the moment that's got a cross against it, being on a very busy road, having a block of units looking right into the backyard, being a very small staircase, turns someone off. And what actually happens is fear of missing out has left the market. And because there's no fear of missing out, buyers will say, hang on a second, that's the number I'm prepared to pay. If you're not prepared to accept it, that's okay. I'm no longer scared about missing out on this property, and they'll look at others. So I think what actually happens is that vendors have to actually reduce their price to meet what the buyer wants. And it's not such a bad story, because if you are upgrading, what it means is that you may have had a correction or a repositioning of 5% on your own property, but if you're upgrading and that's gone down, say, 10%, sometimes you're actually ahead in a marketplace that's actually become a little bit subdued, you know? Because Charles and Derek, you know what it's like. When the market's booming, you might get $100,000 more than what you were hoping for your house, but you end up paying $200,000 more for what you were going to looking to buy.
Yep.
So you end up being $100,000 worse off in a booming market when you're upgrading than now. So I just think that most people have to look at two chapters in the book, not just one.
Yeah. You know? I think I mentioned to you in a conversation about some people I know that bought a property and then they bridging finance, of course, and then they waited to put their property on the market because the Sydney market was still rising.
The market had changed.
Yeah, and market's changing back against them now, and there's a lot of that happening out there. Derek, you're noticing from your role at realestate.com, you're noticing there's a slowdown in Sydney as well.
Yeah, very much so.
What is it showing for you?
And I think I agree with what Tom said. I think it's much more competitive out there at the moment. The downturn in demand is definitely cutting in now to the clearance rates, which we're starting to see. There's a lot more stock on the market and it's staying on for a lot longer periods of time. Yep. So if you're a buyer, great opportunity in terms of the market we're in. And for those that have been looking to upgrade, or even first homeowners, they've now got an opportunity to get in the market where 12 months ago it was so tight they couldn't enter the market. In terms of sellers, I think, as Tom mentioned, I think they need to work very closely with the agent in terms of the pricing and make sure it's in line with buyer demand in the current period we're in, not 3 months ago, because it's changing so fast. Make sure you've got a very strong marketing campaign, because you've got to stand out from the crowd and there is so much competition out there. You want to make sure you've got a competitive advantage and casting that net as far as you can to attract as many buyers as possible. And probably finally, make sure your house is looking as spectacular as you can make it.
Now, can you make it as spectacular as where you live on the Central Coast?
Beautiful location, but I'm always out mowing the lawn and doing the gardens. So.
Overlooking the beach, no doubt. I find it really interesting that the marketplace has changed so much, so quickly. Yep. Now, do you finding the same with apartments in Sydney? Because I know apartments in other capital cities are struggling.
Yes.
It'd be interesting to get both of you.
Yeah, look, we're seeing it across the board, both houses and apartments, but it depends on, I guess, where you are. In terms of houses, we're still seeing really good buyer demand in terms of the northern beaches and eastern suburbs on our site. And in terms of apartments, we're seeing strong demand in the lower North Shore and inner west. So there's still pockets that have got good demand, but to answer your question, we are seeing it across the board.
Tom?
Look, I think if it's, Charles, if it's a block of units on Canterbury Road and there's another 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 of those units that are sort of coming out of the ground or have just been finished, and you've got plenty to pick from, I think if you're a vendor, you're happy to get a buyer that's got some interest. You're going to latch onto that buyer and you're going to hang on to that buyer. So I think, as Derek is saying, it's selectively. If you've got an Art Deco apartment in a good street, which is one of a kind, it might be an apartment, but there's scarce, so they'll go well. But overall, I think all of the real estate market's tough. The only one that appears to be a little bit resilient is a really high end at the moment.
Yeah, it is, it is the way. Well, we've got some interesting properties that Tom's going to talk about.
Yeah.
3 properties, in fact. So, Tom, let's go through those 3 properties. The first one's in Rosebery.
Yeah, so Rosebery, it's only about 10 minutes from where the studio is, and it's presented to you by Chrissy Eli, great agent, new agent. You're seeing a lot of these new, we talk about female agents, Charles. We're seeing an emergence of these, strong female agents come out there. They've got great empathy skills. They know how to actually work very well with buyers, and I'm actually, like you, I agree. I think it's a good decade of female agents.
We've been touching on that because they are very, very different when it comes to social media as well, and you and I have been concerned about what a lot of people post on social media, and it really has not a lot to do with real estate. Yeah,
well, real estate agents that post on social media, and if you're watching this, guys and girls, and you're a real estate agent, you should be posting stuff that serves your community, doesn't serve other real estate agents. And I've got to get that, because I think at the moment there's a lot of people that are using social media platforms to actually say, I'm better than you as a real estate agent.
I'll give you a chance at the end for your rant, all right? Just get on with the property.
So let's go on to, so Chrissy's property is 36 Trevelyan Avenue in Rosebery. Yep. Five-year-old, single level, incredible property, superb locations, tucked away in a Rosebery enclave, 6 k's from the city. And it's only 2 doors from the Australian Golf Club. Perfect for you, Charles. Walking distance to 3 parks, public transport, all at your doorstep, and it's exquisite home. It's going to be auctioned on the 2nd of June. So if you go to realestate.com, you will be able to have a look at all the pictures and everything, and organise to go in and inspect this property. So
it's fantastic, doesn't it?
Beautiful. Yeah, it's a gorgeous home.
Let's have a look at 2 Red Gum Crescent, Mount Barker. I always get a chance when I'm hosting to slip in a Century 21 property.
Okay, so I think, Charles, we might be moving on. Are we moving on to Red Gum, or are we moving on to Belmont Street potentially? But let's have a look at what. Oh, sorry, Red Gum it is. Let's move on to that, and that is from C21, Belinda Gibbons, and it's got a price guide here from $108,000. It's, the best residential development, and it's picked up 3 other awards, and it's won. Look, geez, it's won a lot of awards. The Hampton,
it's a magnificent development that offers in Salisbury. Greg Nybo, the principal, they manage like half the land in South Australia at one stage for the government. Incredible.
Okay, well, Charles, that method of sale, it says it's open, but it's beautifully maintained waterways. Look, that price sounds appealing. Go on to realestate.com, have a look at it. 2 Red Gum Crescent, Mount Barker, South Australia, and Charles would love me to say it's a Century 21 office.
It is, thank you. And finally, 313 Belmont Street.
Okay, 313, again, 5 minutes from here. 313 Belmont Street, Alexandria, price guide of $2.1 million. Auctions on the 26th of May at 9 o'clock. A warehouse building, sensational spot. It's got lock-up for 2 cars, which is a big thing in that area, and it's in one of the best parts of Alexandria. Alexandria's an area 10 years ago, it was nothing, but now you look at Alexandria, restaurants, beautiful parks, rail. So go and have a look at that.
I have one question for you. I know you like to finish it having a bit of a rant around the traps. You're very well known for it. What's the difference, Tom, for you between selling now in winter and coming up with spring? What's the difference?
Look,
30 seconds.
30 seconds. If you're a seller, go July, August instead of September, October, November. September, October, November, you've got all these other properties to compete with. July, August, you'll go in and you'll have first move advantage. So I say be smart, hit the market about 4 to 8 weeks before everyone else does.
Yeah, contrarian. There you go. There you go. And you're absolutely right. Why compete? It's like listing your property for sale with an agent that's got a lot of for sale signs instead of a lot of sold signs. That's a big difference. Derek Taylor, it's always great catching up with you on and off.
Pleasure.
On and off the show. And Mr. Tom Panos.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's the end of the show for us, ladies and gentlemen. Chris Gray should be back next week to look after you and all of your real estate needs.
Information presented on Sky News Real Estate is general in nature. Viewers should seek their own professional advice before purchasing products or services. Sky News Real Estate may receive a fee for commercial arrangements with companies featured in this programming.